Testimony has begun in the trial of the only officer who has been charged in the botched raid that led to the death of Breonna Taylor in Louisville. Former Louisville detective Brett Hankison, who was acquitted of all 3 counts of felony wanton endangerment in 2022, is facing federal excessive force charges by firing blindly into Taylor's apartment on March 13, 2020, through a sliding glass door and a window covered by curtains. Joining us right now is Tamika Mallory. She's the co-founder of Until Freedom. She joins us from Louisville. So Tamika, glad to have you here. Look, this is critically important. The work that Until Freedom and others did, keeping the pressure on, made this trial a reality. We know that Kentucky Attorney General Daniel Cameron, Republican, African-American who's running for governor, did nothing, found nothing, but it was the Biden-Harris Department of Justice that stepped up, and that's how we got these indictments.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, Roland. Thanks for having me on. I haven't seen you in a while. Miss you much. I sat in the courtroom for the last 2 days alongside Tamika Palmer, Breonna Taylor's mother, and other family members and friends. And I have to say that, it's obviously very traumatic that there's 3 years of this continuing, where this family is unable to begin the real healing process and trying to put their lives back together, because every time you turn around, they are dealing with something in relation to the details of this case. I think it is also very, I think that the family also feels a sense of slight satisfaction that people are beginning to hear the true details. This is what Daniel Cameron was supposed to do. He was supposed to ensure that the officers went before a court of law and that a jury of their peers were there to determine the facts of the case. And so now it is being litigated. It is now in front of a group of people and the entire community. It's open to the public to be able to hear so many of the details of what happened that night. I do think that you mentioned Brett Hankison and his role and how he is on trial now. And what is unfortunate is that the officer who actually shot and killed Breonna Taylor and all those people who were involved with how she actually died, none of them are actually being charged, or at this time, none of them are actually facing charges for her murder. And so that still does not leave the family with any peace. However, it is important that the details of what happened to her that night come out and that people are able to hear it. And thank God we have the United States, the feds there handling this case, and they are not leaving any stones unturned.
The thing here is that, you mentioned Daniel Cameron. Here's somebody who goes, I couldn't find anything. But the feds did, and let's be real clear. The feds don't charge unless they absolutely believe they can get a conviction.
Well, let me correct that. He didn't just say that he couldn't find anything. He said that the jurors were unable to find charges for those officers for killing Breonna Taylor. He said it was tragic, but that the jurors did not come back with an indictment for those officers. And the jurors, several of them, I believe it was 4, it was either 3 or 4, several days after the grand jury concluded, they came forward to say that they were never presented with charges for the officers specifically for killing Breonna Taylor. Now, it's important to note that when we arrived in Kentucky, Memorial Weekend of 2020, Breonna Taylor she was killed on March 13th of 2020. So this is 2+ months later. When we got there, we went to a place that was named Injustice Square Park. It is where the protesters were living, many of them occupying that park. It was also used for community functions. It was the beginning point for many of the protests that was happening. When we got in town, people told us, you got to go down there. Everyone we met, from Pookie to Ray Ray to TT and Maria, told us the details that we are now hearing right at this time coming out in court. That means that Daniel Cameron knew this information. And as far as I'm concerned, I've been told by our friend attorney Ben Crump to be careful what I say, because Daniel Cameron is probably the type of person to try to sue me, for something, for defamation or something like that. But I believe that if you, as the Attorney General, have a responsibility to put forth the facts before a grand jury, and you don't do that, what else do we call that except obstruction to justice?
Well, let's just be clear here. Daniel Cameron did not want to indict any cops because he knew he was running for governor, and he did not want that to get in the way of his run.
Absolutely.
And I think it's very interesting that this trial is happening right now in the final month of the governor's race.
Right. Final days.
Well, no, the final days, I'm sorry.
Final days. That's
Sorry,
right.
final days.
Early voting today is the second day of the trial. And today is actually the second day of early voting. And so this is all closely aligned. And you and I both have very strong spiritual beliefs. And I believe that this is happening at this time for a reason, not because the government chose the dates, but because the court has allowed this case to go on at this time. And it lined up in this way to ensure that the voters in Kentucky, those people who we've been out, we've knocked on doors, we've knocked on hundreds of doors, we've talked to people, we've registered voters, but you know that our people and all people need several touches so that they can remember the job that they need to do on November 7th, and even now, as I said, in early voting. And so people are being reminded of what happened to Breonna Taylor that night. You know, so many things are sort of, this case, it has so many different components. It is not just about Breonna. The case is also about other individuals. Kenny Walker, the sister who lived next door, Chelsea. She was 7 months pregnant. The direct adjacent apartment. So Breonna lived in apartment 4, and Chelsea, and her family lived in apartment 3, and they shared a wall. And in her apartment, along with her being 7 months pregnant, also the child she was pregnant with, father was there sleeping with her in the bed, but her 5-year-old son was in the bed as well. And there are bullet holes that you can see that went through the wall in the room where he was sleeping. Bullet holes riddled all throughout her house where a 5-year-old child was sleeping. And the most riveting moment on yesterday during her testimony was when she was asked, why did you lay on top of your baby? What were you doing? Why did you lay on top of your baby? And she said, I laid on top of him because he's my son, and I'll take a bullet for my son. Everyone, especially those of us there with Breonna's family, started to cry because the idea that this woman had to shield her child from wild bullets that was just flying everywhere. Absolutely no care for the citizens in the building, for the other residents, of course, Kenny Walker, and we see what happened to Breonna Taylor. It is completely inexcusable. And that is why Brett Hankison is on trial. And I mean, obviously now everyone wants to tell the truth, because if you remember when you talked about the trial of the past where Brett Hankison was cleared, they were tight-lipped. They had all of them got together, the officers. We now know this because one of the female officers came forward to say that they met in a parking lot and they discussed their strategy, which was, one, to criminalize Breonna Taylor, and also to stay quiet, keep their heads down, and basically deny. But now the facts are coming out, and the other officers are having to say that this particular officer, Brett Hankison, shot through the glass doors and the window that had blackout shades. We've seen the exhibits. We know the blackout shades were there. We know that the blinds were closed as well. And in Black folks' home, we put the the blinds, and then we put the blackout curtains behind it to ensure that people cannot see in and that light does not go in or out. So why would you shoot at those windows not knowing who was on the other side? All of those details are coming out. It's a very serious trial. And as I said, while it is painful and it's gut-wrenching to have these accounts for this family to have to hear, I think they are somewhat satisfied, or they're very satisfied, that the government has pushed it to the point where they are making the story be told in front of the court and the world.
It is indeed tragic, and this is also why. And again, I keep telling people, this ain't about being in love with Biden, being in love with Harris, or any of that. But I need people to understand the Trump Department of Justice, Attorney General Jeff Sessions, Attorney General Bill Barr, they said, we want to pull back on these consent decrees. We think that this is hurting the morale of police officers. There was only one patterns and practice investigation in the 4 years of Trump. This is the difference between a Biden-Harris Democratic DOJ and a Republican Trump Department of Justice. Black folks need to understand that when it comes to voting next year.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with you. And I think that, it's a show for a different day to talk about some of the frustration that we see in this moment, which I think people are righteously indignant, and that folks have the right
Absolutely.
to say that, and in this moment, all we see happening in this country and abroad that we are supporting, people are angry. I do think, though, that those things, Kristen Clark being appointed as Assistant Attorney General to the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice, which I believe has a lot to do with how this happened, because even with Biden and Harris in office, if you did not have the right person sitting in that seat reviewing these
Absolutely.
cases and pushing the issue, we could still not see, this type of trial coming forward for Breonna Taylor. However, I do understand that it's important, and I think some things will take care of itself. That as time goes on and we get closer to the election in 2024, and you start to hear more from the other side, if you will, or hear more from the Republicans and whoever the Republican nominee will be. And as folks are able to get out there and begin to explain, talk about some of the issues that are, really critical for our communities, that there will be some people who will understand the importance of why they need to shape up and go to the polls and make sure that they express themselves and that they cast their vote. However, I am not, in this moment, I feel righteously indignant. I've not said I'm not going to vote, but I do feel and I understand people who are watching what is taking place and watching children die. And in this particular moment, I think we do best not to lean so much on the people who, again, are rightfully angry, but to go to the administration and tell President Biden and the Vice President Harris that they need to see that the people are rising up, and the emotion, the feeling that folks are going through and feeling at this moment may make them stay home. And so I think that the pressure must be focused on them and not so much on the people who are in a moment when we are fighting to save lives.
Oh, actually, again, my whole deal is I've always said keep applying pressure. But what I also understand is that there's a difference in results. When I look at correction officers, jailers, the Department of Justice just launched a civil rights investigation into a jail in South Carolina. None of those things were happening under Donald Trump. And so we have to understand, how do we use our power to achieve the things we want to achieve? But I know what did not happen at all under those last fools, and they damn sure won't give a damn about us. Absolutely. If he gets back in there. So, I'm just, so again, I've challenged him on a lot of different stuff, but what I do understand, there's a very clear choice between who not gonna give a damn about us and who we can actually have a conversation with to get some stuff done. And that's a stark contrast. So we're going to keep following this federal trial in Kentucky. until the end. Tamika Mallory, appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
But hey, before I go, I just want to make sure that folks know that today, Janiyah Palmer, Breonna Taylor's sister, who lived in the apartment with Breonna but wasn't home that particular weekend or that day, she testified. But on Monday, Kenny Walker will be testifying, which is Breonna's boyfriend, who was actually there when she was murdered. And so prayers to them, and also all the coverage, everything that folks can do to send their positive energy to Kenny, because he will have to relive that moment and hear the tapes
Yep.
of being called out of the house and just all the things that happened that night. And then for anybody who wants to share, that court is happening in Kentucky, and if they want to come and be a part of it, please do so. We'll be there.
Well, and he was initially charged as well for
and
firing
sued
his
and
weapon.
sued and sued.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely.
But all of that has now.
All right, Tamika.
Sorry, I was going to say the lawsuit has been dropped. So no, that was it. I was just saying the lawsuit has been dropped. Everything now. Kenny is a free man.
All right. Keep up the great work. We appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thanks. Bye bye.